When you picture the ideal lasagna, you're likely imagining this exact moment. A steaming, towering square, cleanly lifted away from the pan, holding sharp edges while the melted cheese stretches from the bottom. But reproducing that shape at home is famously difficult. Cut into a pan too soon or prep the ingredients incorrectly, and the entire dish collapses. The noodles slide apart, and the strata devolve into a messy, watery puddle on the plate. Fixing that comes down to a concept borrowed from construction: structural integrity. We need to build a dish capable of supporting its own weight. To do that, we start with a specific set of raw materials. You'll need Italian sausage or beef, crushed tomatoes, onions, and garlic. Then, dried lasagna noodles, ricotta and whole milk mozzarella, Parmesan, and a couple of eggs. In this video, we're going to take those basic components and assemble them into a precise, rigid structure. The final result is the product of deliberate, layer-by-layer engineering. Step 1 is preparing our 2 foundation layers, starting with the meat sauce. We need a rich flavor base that won't introduce excess liquid into the final dish. When the ground meat hits the hot skillet, the browning process develops the deep, savory notes we want. You'll stir in the chopped onions and minced garlic, cooking them until they soften and release their aromatics. Before adding the crushed tomatoes to simmer, you have to skim off the excess fat in the pan. Animal fat turns into a liquid oil when heated, and if left in the sauce, it will pool between the pasta layers, making the dish greasy and highly unstable. Next, we move to the cheese mixture. This is where many home cooks encounter their first major structural flaw. Ricotta naturally holds a lot of water. If you spoon it directly out of the tub and into your pan, that moisture turns into steam in the oven. The watery cheese acts as a lubricant, allowing the heavy layers of pasta and meat to slide right off of each other. This cross-section shows the solution. First, drain your ricotta, then mix it with grated Parmesan and a beaten egg. In the oven, the egg proteins coagulate. That acts like a physical net, binding those loose, creamy cheese curds together into a solid, cohesive matrix. By skimming the fat from the meat and binding the ricotta with an egg, we control the moisture. That is our first line of defense against a collapsed lasagna. Now we prepare the pasta. We drop our dried lasagna noodles into salted, boiling water just until they reach an al dente texture. They need to be flexible, but still retain a firm bite. Once drained, lay the noodles completely flat on a clean kitchen towel. This pulls away the excess surface water so it doesn't end up trapped inside the dish. With the components ready, the assembly begins. Take a 9 by 13-inch baking pan and spread a very thin, sacrificial layer of meat sauce directly on the bottom. This stops the pasta from adhering to the pan as it bakes. This model shows the repeating sequence: pasta, ricotta, mozzarella, and meat sauce. Repeat until full. Pasta direction matters. Place the first layer horizontally, trimming edges. Lay the second layer vertically. This cross-hatching mimics masonry cross-bracing, locking layers together so the structure doesn't shear. You'll alternate that direction for every pasta layer until you reach the top. Finish the build with a heavy coating of meat sauce to protect the top noodles from drying out, along with a generous handful of mozzarella and Parmesan. That alternating pasta alignment, combined with a precise sequence of dry and wet ingredients, transforms the dish into a rigid, sliceable architecture. We need to bake this carefully. Preheat your oven strictly to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 180 degrees Celsius. 350 degrees is the optimal sweet spot. It provides enough sustained heat for the cheese to melt and the internal binders to activate, without rapidly drying out the edges before the center finishes cooking. To protect the surface during the bake, cover the pan with aluminum foil, but you must tent the foil slightly. If the metal rests directly against the mozzarella, it will peel off the entire top layer of cheese when you remove it. We execute a 2-phase bake. Leave the foil on for the first 30 minutes to trap the moisture and gently heat the core. Then remove the foil and bake uncovered for another 15 to 20 minutes. This controlled application of heat ensures the internal structure sets completely, while giving you that perfect, bubbling, golden brown crust on top. When you pull the bubbling pan from the oven, you reach the hardest step of the entire process: doing absolutely nothing. You have to resist the urge to cut into it right away. This graph plots exactly why you have to wait. Straight out of the oven, the sauces and melted fats are still in a fluid state. Letting it rest on the counter for 15 to 30 minutes allows the internal temperature to drop. The liquid sauces cool and thicken, and the melted cheese tightens up, moving the dish into a safe zone where it stabilizes into a sliceable state. Once the structure sets, take a sharp knife and make your first clean slice. You'll feel the blade cut through the firm, dense layers of pasta without the interior spilling out into the empty space. Then slide your spatula underneath. With moisture controlled and noodles cross-braced, the spatula lifts out a neat, intact square, revealing distinct, visible layers. By mastering temperature, structural layering, and patience, you have successfully engineered the ultimate classic lasagna.